Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to another episode of the Raw Prospect Podcast. I believe this is episode 201. We are back from our short hiatus during Thanksgiving week. Appreciate your patience. Appreciate you being here. We're going to get into these week 12 games? Or is it week 11?
Week 12.
Week 12. Wow. The season has just flown by. We're going to get into these week 12 games, including Lions Packers from Thanksgiving, and then a few from our Sunday slate yesterday. And then we're going to close the show with before we called it parting shots, but now we're calling it parting takes or just
final takes.
Final takes, basically. We're going to finish with that and then do prospect of the week as well. But before we get into it, subscribe to the channel, leave a like on the video, share it with your friends. We're going to continue to keep talking sports is what we love to do. And my co-host joining me from Houston, Texas, the Stack himself, Mr. Michael Ween. How you doing, man?
Hello, everybody. Hopefully everyone had a fantastic holiday weekend. If you had a long weekend like myself and were able to work from home, it was awesome. Got to see a lot of the family. And it's the first Thanksgiving. I celebrated my birthday yesterday. So this is the first podcast of my Jordan year. But that's another note for another day as I turn 23. We're now past Thanksgiving. This is where the rubber meets the road in the NFL. Period. Last 6 weeks of the season coming up. We're going to break down week 12. We've got 5 games to get into. A lot to talk about after we get into those 5 games with our final takes. We're going to be jumping around to a coaching move that happened earlier today, to Emmy, I believe, has some stuff he wants to say to the Chiefs. I have some stuff I want to say about the Indianapolis Colts. I believe we both have stuff we want to say about the Buffalo Bills, but we will probably cover that when we cover that game. There's a lot going on right now, and that's just in the NFL. We also, upcoming this week, are going to have hopefully an NBA episode and a dit hole, possibly 2. Emmy will be on definitely one of those. Conference championship week. It's one of my favorite weeks every year, and we have vested interests in this week because if Texas gets a couple outcomes to go their way, including a win over Oklahoma State on Saturday, they will be in the college football playoff, which would be huge. And then, National Signing Days coming up here in about 3 weeks. Recruiting starting to heat up in both sports. We got college basketball. Huge week of college basketball last week. That's really when the season started. Feast week was awesome. I'm sure you got to watch at least some of it. We'll be talking about that as well. It's a big week on the Raw Prospect Podcast. So make sure you tune into all of it. Tell all your friends about it. But with all that being said, enjoy the episode, and let's get into the game. Going back all the way to Thursday. Kind of feels like a long time ago at this point with all that happened on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. But we're going all the way back to Thursday for this NFC North battle. We had another NFC North battle tonight, but Lions and Packers. What were your takeaways?
Well, it was this was a weird one. I just thought it was a combination of the Packers are starting to find themselves, and offensively they were sharper than they've been in past weeks. Jordan Love is starting to hit his stride a little bit. Christian Watson finally, was able to show his physicality, use his physical tools in a way that he hadn't this year for the most part. Go up and make contest catches and really set the tone for this offense. And from that point, it really felt like, the Packers come out and they go play action deep shot and they just say, hey, Christian Watson, go get it. Like they came in aggressive, and it seemed like Matt LaFleur had a look in his eye like we're going to come in and win this fucking game. Like that was That was really the mindset, and it was clear. And I got to give credit to them there. But the Lions side of things, Jared Goff didn't look great. His ability to, you know, maneuver through pressure, it didn't look good in this particular game. And that was one thing that, is a huge strength with this Lions team is the fact that they do have maybe the best offensive line in football. And he's not typically under that pressure. But this Green Bay Packers front with Rashawn Gary and Kenny Clark, they were able to get home consistently. And I think that was really the difference in the game. Jordan Love played great, but really it was the defense that was making plays for them.
This is a long time ago at this point. Remember all the way back in week 4. It was on a Thursday night early in the season at Lambeau Field where the Lions just absolutely took it to Green Bay on a Thursday night. They buried them by halftime. The game was over by that point, 27-3 on the road in Lambeau. It got a little closer in the second half, but that was a game dominated by Detroit. I mean, it wasn't hard to see from the start. The commonality in that game was Detroit won that game up front. They rushed for over 200 yards. They pulverized the Packers on both sides of the line of scrimmage. Aiden Hutchinson was making plays in that game. Their defense was aggressive. And, of course, Jordan Love didn't play nearly as good in that game as he did in this game, which I'll get to in a minute. But it's kind of amazed me how much the Packers have closed what was really a wide gap between these two teams in the past 2 months, particularly in the trenches. They played absolutely fantastic in the trenches on both sides of the ball in this game.
Yeah.
The offensive line balled out, and that was one of the reasons that Jordan Love was able to do what he did. No sacks allowed against a pretty aggressive Lions defense. He wasn't hit. No INTs. Was really efficient. You got to give credit where credit is due. That's the best game I've seen Jordan Love play. 22 of 32, 268 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks, no sacks. It was a huge game on the road on Thanksgiving on a short week with a lot of Green Bay's key contributors out.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to see from Jordan Love, and I'm interested to see now where this thing goes from here, because now if you're Green Bay, you're sitting at 5-6, you're winners of 3 of 4, and you're probably a play or two, if I'm being honest, from being winners of 4 straight if things go your way in Pittsburgh a couple weeks ago. They didn't, but your quarterback's playing well. Both sides of the line of scrimmage have come so far since early on in the season. You mentioned Green Bay's defensive front, particularly Rashawn Gary. 3 sacks of Jared Goff was a game wrecker on Thursday. That's his second such game this year where he had 3 sacks. Anything else I want to mention? Oh, the last thing I'll say, Green Bay had some key stops on 4th down, and a bunch of people made plays.
Yeah.
We know the Lions are aggressive. We know Dan Campbell likes to be aggressive in those situations. 4 defensive stops on 4th down. The biggest of those was a 4th down stop that came in the third quarter on what I believe was a fake punt.
Yep.
That the Lions tried from their own 23-yard line. And Lucas Van Ness and Carl Brooks tackled the up man who took the direct snap, and they stopped that from going anywhere. And then 3 snaps later, they end up in the end zone. They extend their lead to 29-14. It didn't really seem like they were surprised by the fake punt. They were ready for it. They were prepared for a team on a short week. I was really impressed. Credit to Matt LaFleur and this coaching staff on both sides of the ball. They're playing well up front. I don't know what their schedule holds the next couple of weeks, but if Jordan Love continues to play like this and you get this kind of play on the lines of scrimmage, and you got guys like Jaden Reed, the guy out of Michigan State that I'm starting to really like, Christian Watson, a good duo of running backs, and a defense that's completely capable, you can make the playoffs in the NFC.
Yeah, definitely. It kind of feels like the same arc they took last year almost, which is a little bit strange, but we'll see where it goes. It's going to be interesting. The 7th spot in the NFC is going to be, I mean, maybe not the most relevant thing in the world in terms of can they go deep in the playoffs, but it's going to be an interesting race.
Yeah, and if you're the Lions, I probably now worry about their defense a little more than I did probably a couple weeks ago. It's a little bit worrisome. They are a very aggressive defense, but they have a tendency to give up some big plays. Don't love their pass rush on a week-to-week, half-to-half basis. It seems like sometimes it's not effective enough. So we'll see where that goes here down the stretch in December. I think where we're really going to find out how good this Lions team is in December, when you got to face, teams that are going to run the football going into the playoffs. Jared Goff playing in the colder weather. We're going to find out a lot more about this Lions team, I believe, here in the next month or so. But this didn't look great. Jared Goff, of course, turned the ball over. I think it was 2 or 3 times. And it's hard to beat a team like Green Bay when you give them opportunities like that. And look, you didn't convert some 4th downs that you usually probably do in some other situations. But at the end of the day, it was the turnovers. And I really think, yes, Detroit could have played a lot better. But I really think from the start, Green Bay took this game. And you got to give them credit.
Yeah, exactly. And the final thing I'll say is the Lions remind me a little bit of the 2016 Cowboys. And the only reason I say that is you have an amazing O-line and then a defense that plays extremely hard and flies to the football, but will give up the big play, as you said. And when they don't have, a grip on the game script, things get out of hand quickly. That's really been the bugaboo for this team, I think. Like when they don't go out and get the lead early, and they're not able to stick with running the football as much, then you get into obvious pass situations. Then you have, the crazy blitzes that NFL defenses can bring you. So that's all I'll say.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else on that game? I think we covered it all.
Yeah, that's it.
Steelers Bengals. I have a long soliloquy on this game. So why don't you give me your thoughts first?
Well, the Steelers offense was better. That's really the main takeaway. If they consistently move the football the way they did, not only like in this game in particular, they didn't put up a ton of points, but it gives the defense rest. And I think the defense looked more fresh in this game, just throughout. And they were able to just go out and make plays like they usually do, obviously, but it's just a more balanced football team, just more practical when you're able to sustain drives, even if they don't come out scoring 7 points. If you're taking, 10 minutes off the game clock on a drive, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but 8 minutes off the game clock, 6 minutes off the game clock, that helps your football team. And especially for a team like the Steelers, I think moving forward, if you can just play ball control offense, control, a little bit with the middle field passing game with Pat Freiermuth like you did in this game, run the football. That's your avenue. And I think in the right matchup, you could even win a playoff game with that strategy.
So here's the thing, guys. Since we last recorded a podcast, the Steelers did something they never do.
Yeah.
And that was fire a coach in the middle of a season. Now, have I agreed with this philosophy, even going back to before um, Matt Canada's tenure in Pittsburgh, which dates back to 2021? No, I don't agree with it. But it's gotten the Steelers to this point of being kind of the paragon of stability. They're never terrible. Mike Tomlin's never had a losing season. I know that's the stat all Steelers fans love to throw out. And it doesn't look like he's going to have one this year. In fact, it looks more likely that this team could end up with their schedule more like 11 or 12 wins than they'll end up with maybe 8 or 9 wins. But they fired Matt Canada. And I think a lot of that was because of the performance in Cleveland. That was a horrendous performance in Cleveland from everybody, not just the coaching staff, not just the play calling, from Kenny Pickett, from the wide receivers. It just was bad. It wasn't good. Aside from Jaylen Warren, it was bad. And I know that Cleveland defense is awesome. So it goes both ways, but Pittsburgh had a chance to win that game. The defense kept them in that game. They created, I think, 1 or 2 takeaways in that game, and the offense just did absolutely nothing with it. The biggest thing about this game, with now Eddie Faulkner being the interim offensive coordinator and Mike Sullivan, the quarterback's coach, calling the plays, kind of a dual approach here, something different that we haven't seen, is Kenny Pickett looked a lot more confident. He was letting it rip, and the Steelers were throwing the ball across the middle of the field. I know it's amazing what you can do when you have a run game and you have a tight end, a pretty athletic tight end, and a reliable tight end that you can use down the seam in the middle of the football field. We saw in the first 2 drives, they hit big plays to Freiermuth, big plays to Freiermuth. I believe Freiermuth was the leading receiver in the NFL this week with 120 yards on 9 catches. And Pickett, he was the most efficient he's been this year. He threw for the most yards he has this year. He was excellent on third downs. I thought the offensive line played a relatively good game in pass protection. There were, I think, 1 or 2 times where Trey Hendrickson got there. But otherwise, I thought Dan Moore probably had one of his better games of the season. I thought the offensive line as a whole played really well. And Pickett, I thought, was just decisive. Let it rip, man. Enough of this, check down. Use the middle of the field. Use these talented receivers. And I thought he did a great job of that. He was excellent on third down, 10 of 14 for 165 yards and a 110 passer rating on third down. By far the best game that Pickett has played. And it should have been better because that I don't know if it was first or second quarter, but that ball to Deontay Johnson was on a rope in the end zone. Apparently, it could have been a touchdown if Pittsburgh had challenged. I don't know. They didn't challenge. It is what it is at this point. But could have been better from Pickett. It was by far his best game, even though he didn't throw a touchdown. I thought Najee Harris, even though he only had 99 yards on the ground, maybe had one of his best games as a Pittsburgh Steeler with 15 carries for 99 yards. He was running hard. He was running hard. That's the Najee Harris we saw at Alabama. And he's been a lot better the past couple weeks. And this duo of Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren has kind of sparked this offense in a way. I thought the offense moved more efficiently. I think this Steelers team, and this is one of the last things I'll say, because of their defense, because of the way that the offense typically takes care of the football. Jaylen Warren did have a fumble yesterday. Nothing really came of that for Cincinnati. But because of the way the Steelers have taken care of the ball, they don't really give the ball to the opponent. The offense has looked bad, but they're not turning the ball over. And because of this defense, who has been playing without Minkah Fitzpatrick the past 3 or 4 weeks, they're going to get him back hopefully this week. Because of this defense and because of the way this new offense can potentially, as you talked about, sustain drives a little bit, I think not only can they get into the playoffs, but maybe depending on the matchup that they get, they could win the playoff game this way, and be kind of a team you kind of want to play, but you also don't want to play. T.J. Watt, after really not doing much in Cleveland, and I think that's a large credit to DeJuan Jones and that offensive line and the things that they were doing, made key plays like T.J. Watt does. Trenton Thompson, the undrafted guy that they brought off the practice squad, had the game-changing play in this game with that interception when Cincinnati was driving to try to extend their lead to 2 scores. It was a good performance from Pittsburgh. Over 400 yards for the first time since 2020. That streak, I was tired of hearing about it. I was tired of hearing about how the Steelers had been outgained in every single game leading up to this point and how they were still 6-4 and this and that. The offense was bad. I'm glad they changed coordinators. I still want to see more from Pickett before I'm convinced that he's our guy for at least the next 2-3 years up until his rookie deal expires. And I think with this running game and a new approach utilizing the middle of the field, if they can get Deontay Johnson back in line for some of the things that he's been doing the past couple of weeks, which I'm not even going to get into that right now. I like it. At least they made a change, and usually change results in good things, usually. And, they say the grass isn't always greener on the other side, but it got to a point where with Pittsburgh's offense, no matter who it's going to be, the grass is greener on the other side.
Yeah. The grass was like brown. So
yeah. Yes.
I mean, the throw that Pickett made to Pickens down the left sideline. I don't even know what quarter it was. I'm sure you know the one I'm talking about. I mean, throwing it down the field on a rope. I mean, that's.
I don't know.
Good stuff, man.
I don't know if people remember because it was a long time ago back in August. If you watch this Steelers team during the offseason, this is when a lot of optimism started to I guess, surround this Pittsburgh team. That offense was a buzzsaw. And I know it's just preseason, and you take that with a grain of salt, but this kind of looked like one of the reasons I think a lot of media coming into the season were a little higher on Pittsburgh than others. I know most still hated the system, but you saw flashes of what this offense could do in the preseason, and this looked more like that. They were letting Pickett throw it down the field, exactly. And that's encouraging. Yeah. I would much rather Pickett throw it down the field, and throw 1 or 2 interceptions than not throw it down the field and just stay status quo with no intercept. Like, to find out what you have in a quarterback, you have to throw it down the football field. Just the bottom line.
Yeah, you just have to show some level of trust in him. I mean, I think this particular game also, he was much better under pressure. The Bengals, they have a really good pass rush, and like it felt like not only did the Steelers' offensive line play really well, but also Kenny Pickett, I think, was more sharp in terms of beating blitzes with his arm rather than, just bailing,
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's all for that game. Things are looking up in Pittsburgh, and just real fast. I know you can't overlook Arizona, but you got, what are they, 2-9 Arizona
Yeah.
coming into Pittsburgh on Sunday. Then you got 2-9 New England on Thursday night. Then you go to the Colts, and then you host the Bengals again with Jake Browning. So I just look, and you finish at Seattle, at Baltimore. That won't be easy, but I mean, hell, you just take care of business, win the games that you're supposed to win. Pittsburgh's
Yeah.
in the playoffs,
Yeah. 10 wins at minimum.
hopefully.
Definitely.
Hopefully.
I think there's definitely a lot to like about what's going on in Pittsburgh right now, for sure. There's some good mojo there. At the right time, too. In November, this is when you want to start playing better.
And this is kind of what they did last year in a way. They started to play better. They won 7 out of their last 8. They started to play better near Thanksgiving, after Thanksgiving, and it wasn't against world beaters by any stretch of the imagination. And it's not going to be this year as you look at the quarterbacks that are going to play, and it's not Murderer's Row by any stretch of the imagination, but you play who you play in the NFL. So with all that being said, let's move on to another divisional matchup in the early window. I'd argue the second best game of Week 12, just from a watchability standpoint, and that was Jaguars and Texans. What were your
Yeah.
takes on this one?
Oof. This was an amazing game. I was rooting hard for the Texans. It just kind of it's just a feel good story seeing that like a young team just rise up like this. And if they won this one, then it would just the hype would just be up another level. Being first in their division against a team that was, you know, touted as, dark horse Super Bowl contenders in some eyes. But I mean, they played solid for the most part. I just thought the Jags, just played. I would say this was probably their most complete game they've played of the season. In terms of defensively, their pass rush was everywhere, and C.J. Stroud was holding the ball a long time. That is true, but I thought Josh Allen, the fact that he was able to have 5 pressures against Laramie Tunsil, who, I mean, he's on a short list of the best left tackles in football. Whether you want to put him, first, second, third, fourth, whatever, he's on the short list. And Josh Allen was able to dominate that matchup. And I thought that was big. Him and Trayvon Walker really showed up in terms of the pass rush, and that really put a damper on this Texans passing game that had been so potent. They really didn't get a whole ton going until the second half, and then offensively, I mean they missed a few chances here and there, but it wasn't like before where they were just kicking themselves in the foot. It wasn't, penalties or turnovers or anything like that. It was more so just, oh, we missed a touchdown because Trevor threw it a tick late, or we missed a touchdown because it hit off of Calvin Ridley's hands. But it felt like they were able to bounce back from those types of mistakes on the next play and make it work and still have a really productive offensive day.
Yeah, one of the things that stood out to me, I mean, you could just hear it in the post game from Jacksonville. They know, like, NFL teams aren't stupid. I think this rivalry,
Yeah,
what is going to become of a rivalry, I believe, between Trevor Lawrence, C.J. Stroud, and Doug Peterson against DeMeco Ryans on the defensive side of the ball is going to be fantastic. I mean, we're just scratching the surface of this AFC South thing. You could argue the Titans have found a quarterback. The Colts maybe have found theirs. We really kind of got screwed out of seeing Anthony Richardson this season. Hopefully, that situation continues to improve. But Indianapolis is another story I want to talk about later.
They certainly have their coach.
Yes, they absolutely do. Texans have their coach. Jaguars have their coach. And
of course, Tennessee as well.
Tennessee has their coach. I mean, every team has their coach, and you could argue at least 3 of the 4 have their quarterback, at least for right now. But NFL teams aren't stupid. The Jaguars aren't stupid. They acknowledge it pretty clearly in their post game. They know the Texans are coming. They're aware. Quote from Trevor Lawrence. Quote, I want teams in our division to be as bad as possible. I kind of laughed at that one. The way they're playing, there's going to be some great matchups down the road. CJ's playing lights out. To be a rookie and play how he is, ? It's going to be fun for years to come. I just wanted to get that out. I think this is going to be one of the better rivalries, or it's going to become one of the better in-division rivalries in the NFL for years to come. Yeah, I mean, really not much I can add on to what you said. Look, I still think Stroud played another really good game. Became the first rookie in league history to record 300 passing yards in 4 consecutive games. He and Tank Dell have this thing going now. I really like Tank Dell, the rookie out of I think it was the University of Houston.
U of H. Yep.
U of H. Just a 6th time in NFL history, a rookie tandem has connected for 6 or more scores in a single season. And it's the first time since, guess when? Andrew Luck and T.Y. Hilton did it back in 2012. That's according to The Athletic, to give credit to my source. I thought both quarterbacks played well, as you mentioned. I mean, this was a big win for Jacksonville. It was big. You couldn't afford to lose this game, even on the road against a Texans team that was kind of hot coming in. And this puts you now, 2 games up on both Houston and Indianapolis, but Houston and Indianapolis are still looming in that divisional race, both at 6 and 5. This was a big win, though. Both quarterbacks played well. I thought Trevor Lawrence was really, really good. But yet, even with everything that Jacksonville did in that first half with their pass rush and that defense, not really allowing Houston to get in any sort of rhythm early. Even with everything considered, it came down to Matt Amendola, the kicker for Houston, from 58 some yards off the crossbar doink. I mean, it was one of those games once again. That just shows you, I think, the kind of games we're going to get from these two teams down the road. And I'm excited to watch it. But big win for Jacksonville. You're now set at 8-3, and you're tied with Miami and Kansas City for second best record in the AFC behind Baltimore. Jacksonville is 2 games up in the division race. But as I mentioned, Houston and Indianapolis are looming. And I'm going to talk about Indianapolis later on when we get to final takes.
Yeah, and Jags got the ball with 20 seconds left in the first half and had a huge play down the sideline to Christian Kirk. Got it all the way down to the 1-yard line with 1 second left, then decided to go for it, got stuffed when they had the opportunity to really stretch out that lead to, I believe it would have been 20-7 if they had scored that touchdown there. And at that point in the game, I was like, okay, yeah, that was probably the play of the game if the Texans somehow win this thing. That is a huge momentum swinger, but it didn't end up playing out that way.
Kevin says yes. Thank you, Kevin, for your comment.
Okay.
That was at the 22-minute mark. So can't exactly remember what that was in reference to, but thank you for your engagement in tonight's show. Feel free to comment more if you're still watching. Speak your opinions. All right. Bills. No, we're saving that one for last. Broncos and Browns. What a turnaround this has been for Denver.
Holy moly.
What? Yeah. Give me your quick thoughts, and then I'll give you mine.
This is a full circle moment for Russell Wilson, I think. It kind of feels like he's playing Wisconsin football again. Just running the living shit out of the football with a really good running back tandem, really underrated running back tandem in Samaje Perine and Javonte Williams. Even without the rookie, by the way, Jaleel McLaughlin, who I think was injured in this game. So they are going to have a running back trio when he gets back. But nevertheless, they were just running it straight down the Browns' throat. And there was, I mean, they just played the physical brand of football. That's really all it was. I mean, you got to give credit to the Broncos' offensive line because earlier this year, I don't know if this was not even on my radar that they could just reinvent themselves into a power running football team.
Yeah.
I just didn't have that on my radar at all. I knew they had made additions to their O-line in the offseason, obviously bringing in Mike McGlinchey and, of course, the guard from the Ravens. I can't remember his name at the moment. But this was not on my bingo card. Let's just say that. Putting up 29 points on the best defense in football. I mean, bravo. I mean, the running game and the emergence of Courtland Sutton. And then, of course, the defense waking up. But it's really all come together. I think a few episodes ago, I did a little rant on the Broncos at one point when they were 1-5, I believe, and about how they just found a way to lose games that they should be winning, and it's completely flipped since then.
Yeah. Where do we even start? As you mentioned, it's first of all, we mentioned the obvious. Stunning midseason turnaround for Vance Joseph's defense. You know all the stats, but probably by now. But obviously, you gave it 70. I still laugh. I can't even say it without laughing. You know, 70 points in a Week 3 loss to the Dolphins, and they were yielding this Broncos defense, which now looks like world beaters, and I'll get to that in a minute. 36.2 points per game through 5 weeks, easily the worst in football. One of the worst starts for a defense in NFL history. And they found something in October. Got a few players back from injury, like Justin Simmons. That's a big piece, and that's obviously made a little bit of a difference. That's helped. They started to force a flurry of turnovers. And the result, over the past 6 weeks, you're now only allowing 16.5 points per game. And that's completely flipped the complexion of their season, along with the fact that, go figure, Russell Wilson is playing really damn good football. They've now stretched their winning streak to an NFL best 5 straight wins. That's tied for the Super Bowl favorites, in my opinion, the Philadelphia Eagles, who lead the league with a 10-1 record. And against the Browns, who I still believe have the best defense in football, Denver matched their physicality. They ran the football, and on defense, that they only allowed 2 third-down conversions, recovered 3 fumbles, and on the other side of the ball, Russell Wilson was efficient, 13 for 22, 134 yards and a touchdown. When you only have to throw the football 22 times and you win by 17 points, I mean, that tells the story. It really does.
Yeah, and one other thing about that defense, they found a gem in Jaquan McMillan. I think he's an undrafted free agent. I'm pretty sure, but they've had him in the lineup. I think ever since the Bears game, where they ended up coming back and winning. From that point on, he's been in the lineup and he's been fantastic for them. I think just the secondary, the complete switch over from their secondary is I think amazing. And then of course the emergence of Baron Browning, almost in like a Micah Parsons esque move from linebacker to edge. He's been a world beater. I mean, he's been just absolutely killing it.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to say is you mentioned how the Broncos started 1-5. The horrendous defense. It didn't look good. Things looked hopeless at one point. It still is not unheard of in the National Football League. We have seen this before.
Yeah.
Possibly since I think we've been doing this podcast, I believe. Only 3 teams, though, in NFL history have rallied from 1-5 to start a season to making the playoffs. And I don't know that the Broncos are for sure going to make the playoffs in what's a loaded AFC, but they're for sure like right in the thick of it right now. Like they are right in the thick of things in that race at 6-5 now with 5 straight wins. The last team to do it, rallying from 1-5 to making the playoffs, was the Colts back in 2018.
Yep.
And the Broncos have given themselves a chance. I think Sean Payton has to be at the top of the discussion for Coach of the Year for what he's done. I think Vance Joseph absolutely probably saved his job with what he's done with that defense. They look like the Denver Broncos.
Yeah.
Team that's going to be hard to beat in Mile High. They're going to be physical. They've got a really, really goddamn good defense. And Russell Wilson's just playing, like you mentioned, like he's gone back to playing that Wisconsin style of football. Just
It suits him.
efficient, not really making mistakes, not blowing you away, but winning football from your quarterback.
Yeah, and it's not like he's like just checking it down either. He's
No.
throwing it downfield still.
Yeah.
He's there's a I don't know. I think you look at the numbers and you're like, whoa, he only threw for what 100 and something yards this game, but it didn't really feel that way. It was really just you're running the football so well. Why would you throw it?
Exactly. And as I mentioned, like those are the best wins when you can, especially against a defense like Cleveland, who, I mean, they're just ferocious. I mean, there are a bunch of different adjectives that you could use to describe Cleveland's defense. When you don't have to throw the ball and you're just winning at the line of scrimmage and running the football and throwing when you need to, those are the best wins. When you can do that and win by double digits against a really goddamn good defense, maybe the best defense in the NFL, that tells you all you need to know. It's what a turnaround this has been for the Denver Broncos. It can't be stressed enough. Now, I'm interested to look at the Denver Broncos schedule. Maybe we can circle back around to that in final takes. You guys probably aren't going to like it, but from here on out, we have to mention the standings because we're now down to the thick of it. As I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, this is where the rubber meets the road. After Thanksgiving in the National Football League, the last 5 to 6 weeks, the playoff race really heats up. Division races heat up. We know by now kind of the teams that are in the thick of it in each conference. We kind of know what each team is. Nothing's really going to drastically change at this point unless an injury happens, which we don't hope for. So, yeah, you might get tired of it, but these things have to be mentioned from here on out. because that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
we're
This is
coming
the
down
fun
the,
part.
this is the fun part.
Yeah.
So speaking of fun, what the hell happened yesterday afternoon
Oh my
in this
gosh,
Bills
man.
Eagles game?
I was watching Red Zone. I don't know if you watched like the afternoon slate of Red Zone at all, but it was a bizarre situation. What happened was there was a alarm going off in the Red Zone studio, and it was in the middle of it was the middle of the fourth quarter of this game, Bills and Eagles, and Chris Hansen comes up to the mic and you're like, "We're being told we have to evacuate the building," and then he said, "Oh, I'm okay to stay, but the entire control room has to leave." So they just left it on the Bills and Eagles game, which of course was a good thing because everybody wanted to see that game anyway. But um, that was I had to go back and watch the entirety of this game because I was obviously watching on Red Zone. But I just wanted to mention that weird situation there because that was very weird. I don't know if you were familiar with that because like the Red Zone broadcast just completely ended without even like a explanation. Like it just.
Yeah.
But get to the game. Sorry, weird tangent there. Oh my gosh. It I texted this into our group chat. It feels like the Bills are speed running all of the different ways they can break their fans' hearts in the last 3 years, and really just in their franchise history, to be honest. If you look at it big picture, 4 Super Bowl losses in a row, all that. But man, I mean, this one really hurts. This one was one where you did everything right. You turned the Eagles over. Ran the you ran the crap out of the football for the first time in what felt like years. You got Gabe Davis going. You had a balanced passing attack, spreading it around to different receivers. And you had Josh Allen going in the running game. You had everything going for you. You played great football. But this Eagles team, man, I can't give them enough credit because this was, I mean, they were dead in the water and they just hung around, man. They just, I think 55 yards of passing in the first half from Jalen Hurts, and it didn't even feel like that much. It felt like maybe 10, to be honest. They weren't moving the ball at all, and they were really just hanging on by a thread, down by 10 for most of that game, and it really was just that defense hanging in, keeping them within striking distance. That really was all it was. That's really all it was. And then the Bills let them hang around. They didn't put their foot down, and all of a sudden you're in a dogfight in the fourth quarter. And the Eagles have yet to lose one of those. Obviously, the Jets game, but against the elite of the elite, the Eagles have. They've been in these battle-tested situations, and they've won. They've came out on top in every single one.
3 things stood out to me for this Eagles team in this win over the Bills. Their depth on the line of scrimmage, on the lines of scrimmage, I should make that. How complete their roster is, top to bottom, and the composure of one Jalen Hurts. Let's go one by one here. We're in a period of pro football right now where very few teams, if at all, lack trouble spots on their offense and defensive lines. Like, that's really a issue right now in the National Football League. A lot of times, I mean, these teams are really at this point in the season with guys banged up. I mean, they're mixing and matching their offensive lines, trying to figure out like, oh, we need a right tackle. this isn't good. But it's amazing to me. Somehow the Eagles don't have much to worry about on the offensive line. They showed that on Sunday
No.
with the options that they have in reserve. Case in point, their right tackle, Lane Johnson, who's a future Hall of Famer, potential Hall of Fame right tackle. He's had troublesome groin that's been nagging him. He had an MRI on Sunday. The team shelved him before the Bills game. He didn't play yesterday. And that left Jack Driscoll to take his place, fourth-year guy. And that offensive line didn't miss a beat. Yeah. Jalen Hurts was sacked twice, but as a whole, I thought he had plenty of room to run, plenty of time to operate in the pocket for the most part against a good Bills pass rush. And the Eagles rolled on the ground, 185 yards on the ground. And that was absent their Hall of Fame right tackle. The type of depth that exists on this Eagles team is just insane. To the point where they had their top three edge guys on the field, Hassan Reddick, Josh Sweat, and Brandon Grimm, on the field together for the Bills' final offensive snap. They can just rotate guys in and out on both sides of the line of scrimmage. We all knew that, but it needs to be pointed out again, and it showed up in this game.
I mean, you lose Fletcher Cox, and you go straight to Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis. Like, you might be upgrading.
Yes.
Like, it's ridiculous.
And that's what makes this Eagles team so hard to beat. Now, the next thing, how complete their roster is. We know about their lines of scrimmage. We know about their star-studded receiver room with Devontae Smith, Olamide Zaccheaus, who made plays yesterday for them in big-time moments. Of course, A.J. Brown, who's been one of the top 2 or 3 receivers in the National Football League this year. We know about their experienced group of corners. We know about this roster. We know about their edge rushers. We know about their running backs. I mean, it's just a completely star-studded roster. And then to add to all of that, you have this kicker whose name is Jake Elliott. And in his 7th year with the team, right around 7:30 Eastern time last night, he was the most important man in Philadelphia. Now,
and the most hated man in Dallas, let me tell you.
Yes. He entered Sunday's game. Listen to this. According to ESPN Stats and Info, a perfect 7 for 7 on game-tying or go-ahead field goals in the final 2 minutes of regulation or overtime in his career. So as Nick Sirianni measured his decision, they sent him out from the Bills 41 with 25 seconds left. 4th and 17. It was wet. It was sloppy the entire game with all the conditions. A 59-yarder. He goes out. I mean, just laced it. Line drive, low, right down the middle to force overtime. And at that moment, I was like, oh gosh.
Here we go.
I don't know for sure who's winning this game in overtime because it's NFL overtime. You just never know how it's going to go. But I kind of have a feeling like somehow the Eagles are going to win this game.
Yeah. When Jim Nantz said, sorry to interrupt, but when Jim Nantz mentioned Josh Allen 0-5 in his career in overtime, I'm like, oh God, here we go.
Yeah. And it kind of goes back to something that the CBS guys were talking about during the Iron Bowl. Like, if you're Auburn, you played really well. You kind of controlled that game. You had an opportunity to win it. But if you don't cut the head off the snake's going to eventually bite you. Yeah. And that's kind of in a way what happened in this game. The Bills played really well. But they're kind of up 10, kind of just going about their business. They didn't cut the head off the goddamn eagle. And the eagle came back and it raped them.
The bird.
Yeah. It came back and it humped them. So, yeah, I mean, that and then.
That's an interesting visual.
And then the demeanor.
Gosh. Never mind.
And then the demeanor of Jalen Hurts, which we kind of all know about by now, but I mean, good God. 15-yard dart to Devontae Smith to cut the lead to 24-21 in the fourth quarter. The 29-yard dart to Olamide Zaccheaus in the back corner of the end zone on 3rd and 15 moments later. To cash in on what was a James Bradbury pick to give Philly its first lead. Throws that just methodically moved the Eagles into the fringes of Elliott's field goal range at whatever it was, 59 yards. 3 completions on Philly's one possession of overtime that covered 32 yards, or the runs of 8 and 12 yards respectively that bookended the drive, the final one resulting in the game-winning touchdown. I mean, it kind of just looked like the entire game, even when the Eagles were struggling to move the ball, that Jalen Hurts kind of knew, like, oh, we're going to win this football game. And
Yeah,
it's kind of the confidence that this entire Eagles team has. And that's kind of what makes the Eagles 32-8 since the start of the 2021 season. Hurts' first year as a starter. Long soliloquy, but at the end of the day, those are the 3 things I look at with this Eagles team: the completeness of their roster, their lines of scrimmage, and Jalen Hurts, who's once again playing really good football.
yeah. And after the Cowboys game, I questioned their coverage. I questioned their secondary, and since then, obviously they go out and trade for Kevin Byard, which, oh gosh, honestly, I'm so pissed about that. But I mean, James Bradbury, Darius Slay, I mean, they've stepped it up, man. And everybody is talking about the Bills gauntlet that they've got coming up. The Eagles have been on a gauntlet these past few weeks. Dallas twice. You have to go into Kansas City, you play the Bills, and then you play San Francisco. I mean, and then you play Dallas again. So
Yeah,
that's about as tough as it gets, man. And they
yeah.
haven't lost yet.
I was just about to mention Sunday at 3:25
Yeah,
in the late window.
I can't wait.
49ers at Eagles. And then we get the Cowboys game the very next week. NFL down the stretch is going to be nutty. All right. So with that brings us to final takes.
One thing.
Okay.
If there's any team that can stop the tush push, it's the 49ers. Like, I think if there's there's anybody in the league who's going to really just blow the whole thing up, it's Fred Warner. I think he could possibly Palomalu it and just jump over the line and just fuck it all up. But we'll see. I cannot wait.
I cannot wait either. This weekend, I'm almost
orgasmic.
I'm not even. I wanted to go there, but I'm not going to go there.
We can go there. I don't care, man. Let's go. It's been a while. It's good to be back.
I was gonna say aroused by the games that we have coming up this weekend with Bama and Georgia and Oregon and Washington, and then Eagles and Niners. And I mean, if you're a real football fan,
man. Yeah,
it'll get your blood going down there. All right, so
it's honestly surprising how much the word aroused is used in sports commentary, to be honest.
Okay, so
moving on.
We've hit the 1 hour mark. For the next 15 minutes, let's do our final takes. I'll let you start. Wherever you want to go.
Well, there's a monster that has woken up in Kansas City yesterday. That's where I want to start. I think we've been waiting on it, and all of a sudden Kansas City goes down 14-0 to the Raiders on the road, and all of a sudden that offense heats right up. And this is what we've been waiting on. All of a sudden, you get Rashee Rice going on passes down the field. You get Travis Kelce going. You get Justin Watson going, and then the offense starts to cook. And there was a lot of panic coming out of a lot of people. Not us. We are still on the Kansas City train, whether we like it or not. But I mean, I don't know how you look at that second half performance offensively from Kansas City and not be shaking in your boots if you're in the AFC.
Yeah, I agree with you. What I want to talk about is the Indianapolis Colts, as I mentioned previously on this episode of Raw Rundown. All right. Look, Shane Steichen, I don't want to kiss his ass too much because that would sound a little weird. But
that would be weird, yeah.
I'm losing it now. All right. The offensive ingenuity of Shane Steichen to get this Colts team where it is now at 6-5. I mean, it's just really something special to watch, said Jonathan Taylor in his post game. They're running the football, and you look at what this team is doing. 3 straight wins. They pulled even with Houston in the AFC South at 6-5, 2 games back at Jacksonville. The Colts are in that mix of teams that could push for a wild card spot. And look, to people on the outside who may not believe in them, I mean, things really went nuclear with their football operation last year. And to bring in a guy like Shane Steichen to stabilize that situation with a guy like Gardner Minshew, who's completely capable, but wasn't really the plan coming into this year, it's fun to watch. Steichen looks like himself, plenty of belief in what he's inherited. They're showing up consistently on a week-to-week and week in, week out basis. You kind of know what you're going to get from this Indianapolis team. It's a gambling style offense that requires faith in these players carrying out the risks that they take. And you saw it showed up with 12:50 left in the first half, with Indy up 10-3 on a 4th and 1 with the ball on their own 47. Rather than nurse that one possession lead and punt the ball away, they lined up in the shotgun and they threw the ball to the flat to Michael Pittman, who caught and run for 24 yards. And that set up a scramble touchdown from Minshew 6 plays later to make it 17-3. So instead of potentially nursing that 7-point lead going into half, or potentially having the game tied up if you punt that ball away, or maybe closer going into halftime, you're up by 14. And that's kind of just in summation what this Colts team has been. Now, it showed up again as the Buccaneers fought back a little bit. They cut the Colts lead to 20-17 with 9 minutes left in this game. And once again, on 4th and 1 from the Tampa 49, they lined up in the I formation. They faked to Taylor, and they threw a pop pass over the defense to Mo Alley-Cox for 30 yards. It's just that aggressive style that we kind of saw with Shane Steichen back in Philly. He's brought that over to Indianapolis, and it's paying huge dividends. And the last thing I'll say is they've gotten one of the, I think, more underrated part of this Indianapolis season is I didn't think going back to September that Jonathan Taylor was going to play football for this team. With the ownership situation and the contract situation and everything that was going on. But it seems like Shane Steichen, what he's been doing with this offense has gotten Jonathan Taylor to buy back into what this organization, what they're building towards. And they have their head coach. There's no doubt about that. This was an A plus hire, and I like what they're doing. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's hard not to. I think they very quietly gone from maybe the most toxic situation with a nut job of an owner to now with Anthony Richardson possibly having one of the brightest futures in the NFL. Like if you're looking this as like a stock, if you're buying stock in NFL teams, Indianapolis is near the top of that list in terms of a young team with a young quarterback with a offensive coach on the rise who I think within the next 2 or 3 years will be ascending to the likes of Kyle Shanahan's and the Sean McVays and the Mike McDaniels.
Yeah.
That's really how highly I think of him. And we also see it with the Eagles offense. They miss him. Just the flow of their offense hasn't been the same. Just being able to tie plays together. It's gotten better as the year has gone on, but it hasn't been quite on that level of mastery that Shane Steichen seems to have. And then the defense, the other thing, Samson Ebukam has been a amazing pickup.
Yep.
He's been really, really good. And he's brought a different type of veteran energy that I think they needed. And I think him being on the opposite side of their young guy, Kwity Paye, has really unlocked something that they just haven't had in a pass rush in a while.
Absolutely. Do you have any other final takes, or can we finish off with the coaching news of today?
My last final take is just touching on the Bills, not to double back or anything, but I really just want to say, big picture here. Josh Allen played another amazing game, but on that 4th and 7 okay, before I get to that, first of all, the kneeling with 20 seconds left, very questionable decision, I thought. Obviously, testing your luck with overtime, not a horrible move, but you have Josh Allen, and you've seen it for yourself. Like the corn flip goes the wrong way, and all of a sudden, the fate isn't in your hands anymore. You have the ball with 20 seconds left. I think you at least take a couple of shots, and then of course the 4th and 7 as well. Late in the fourth quarter, I think you go for that. The situation was, I believe it was, what was it? 31-28 at that point, I think.
Yeah.
Bills with the lead. 4th and 7 in Eagles territory. They end up taking the field goal and going up 3. It's hard to, be super critical of that decision, but again, you have Josh Allen. You have to know the strengths of your football team. And I think I would have gone for it there.
I agree with you. And we were talking about it during the game, so it's not 2020 revisionist history.
Right.
I think we finished with this, and that's the Panthers fired head coach Frank Reich today or this morning after their 1-10 start in year 1 of Frank Reich as the head coach. To me, at this point, and look, I did like David Tepper going back to his days as a minority owner of the Steelers. But I just think this, if it's not already, could be more of a ownership, football operations problem in Carolina than it is anything to do with any of these head coaches. And look, Frank Reich wasn't perfect. It wasn't working out. You move off him, good for you. But what we know about David Tepper is he's intense, he's demanding, he's involved on the ground with the team that he paid $2.25 billion to purchase 5 years ago. And since then, he rode out 2 years with the coach he inherited in Ron Rivera, fired him, and then gave a massive contract, less than three, to Matt Rule, fired him, and now he's fired a third coach in 5 years. And
all in season as well.
All in season. Look, with a rookie quarterback, trying to build this roster, I just don't believe, I think they maybe have some good options internally. Their special teams coordinator, Chris Tabor, is a guy that I've heard mentioned. And look, sometimes firing a coach middle of the or at this point in the season kind of sparks them down the stretch, and you can get them to play better. But at this point, your season's lost. I just don't know that this is eventually you hire, you fire, you hire, you fire. Eventually, you got to look yourself in the mirror. Yeah. I think it's a lot of different things in Carolina right now. And the season probably hasn't gone how they thought it might go at the beginning. And that's why, someone's got to be the scapegoat. And I feel bad for Frank Reich. Hell, I would welcome him in Pittsburgh as my offensive coordinator. If it were to come down to that, I don't know that it will. But yeah, I think eventually in Carolina, you're going to, I don't know. I don't know. I think it could be more of a operations ownership deal more so than it is. Who's hiring these coaches?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I hear you on all that. I do think there is some merit in the football side of the firing. I think there's something to, the fact that the Colts offensive line looked so bad under Frank Reich last year and all of a sudden looks just fine now and under a new coaching staff with all really the same players. And then same with this Panthers offensive line. Last year looked to have a bright future and now looks like a absolute disaster now in just under a year. There is some football merit to it, but at the same time, it's a bad look. It's a really, really bad look as an organization that, you just, put your chips on the table. Let's go get our guy at quarterback and let's see if we can go win our division. And now all of a sudden you're 1-9 and you're just looking to not break the kid at that point.
Yeah.
And I think this is a last-ditch desperation move to just see if they can, by the end of the year, get Bryce Young to a place where he can build into his second year.
Yeah.
And with how things were going, I don't know if you could have done that under Frank Reich, unfortunately. And I don't know if you can even do that with whoever they're going to run this with now. But either way, I think the move was going to be made after the offseason anyway.
Yeah.
Or in the offseason anyway.
I think there could be some, depending on how they play the rest of the year, there could be some logic in potentially promoting either their special teams coordinator or their defensive coordinator and hiring internally. But it just seems like, on the other hand, it just feels like David Tepper's a guy that's already planning to go outside the organization to find the next guy. And it kind of feels like he didn't want his plan to be disrupted by some late season rally. it's hard to believe that even if they win, that there would be a groundswell of support for a guy like Chris Tabor. I'm not sure exactly how you say his name, to get the full-time job long term, given the history of David Tepper. But who knows? We'll see. It's now the league's swiftest firing in 45 years. The last person to get fired this quick, and this doesn't count Bill Belichick's resignation in 2000, was Pete McCauley, who was fired after 9 games as the 49ers head coach in 1978. So,
and to go from the Steelers organization to this is just talk about polar opposites.
Yeah. 3 coaches and over 50 years in one organization.
And don't even get me started on the amount of quarterbacks. My gosh.
Yeah, exactly. So with all that being said, I think that's going to wrap it up for tonight's episode. Really fun episode, by the way. I think one of our best. Anything else?
No. Loved the energy in this one. Definitely a little bit of chaotic energy there at the end, but it's welcomed every once in a while. But yeah, really, really fun weekend of football, man. Can't complain. I think, a lot of people were complaining about the Thanksgiving games, but I really didn't, I really didn't mind it. Got a Cowboys win, got a nice upset from the first game. So a lot of good football. Can't complain.
And there's going to be a lot more to come.
Yep.
Thank you to Kevin for your comment. Thank you to everyone who tunes in to our live streams and continues to support our channel. Make sure you check out all our great content coming this week. We got some planning to do, but we're going to have Dit Hole for sure. We're going to have NBA for sure. And then we're probably, or at least going to try to have power rankings as well, but we'll see about that as we do that bi-weekly after every even numbered week in the National Football League. As we get down the stretch with conference championships and the playoff race is starting to really heat up in the National Football League. So with all that being said, thank you guys, and we're going to see you probably tomorrow for another episode. So stay tuned. And just like the Frank Reich era, short-lived in Carolina, we are gone. Peace out.
# make Bryce Young great again. Peace out.